Hello everybody, welcome. Today we're going to be ranking every main Final Fantasy game by how long they take to beat. This will include beating them on the main scenario quest, ignoring all the possible side quests and everything. Just the time to beat on the main quest. We're going to start off with the original Final Fantasy, coming in at number 20. It'll take approximately 17 and a half hours to beat. Came out 35 years ago. Great way to play this would be on the 20th anniversary edition released for the PSP. Currently they'll also be doing the pixel remasters for the PC. Number 19, Final Fantasy IV. This was actually the first Final Fantasy I played. It was released as Final Fantasy II in America. It's one of the highly revered versions. The other one being the Final Fantasy VI, which would be 3 in the West. Final Fantasy IV, approximately 23 and a half hours to beat. Gameplay is regarded highly for a engrossing story, engaging characters, and well-written scenario. Number 18, Final Fantasy II, 25 and a half hours for this follow-up to the original Final Fantasy. So often looked at as one of the worst. It had a little bit of additional, but characters would attack their own party members to gain levels, skill levels. Number 17, Final Fantasy III-2, 27 and a half hours to follow up to the lightning themed. However, lightning's not in this one. You play as Zara. It's the shortest of the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy. And when it comes to main story, it's probably the least popular of the three Final Fantasy XIIIs, but 27 and a half hours. Number 16, Final Fantasy XV, coming in at 28 hours in the 16th place. It was originally released in a unfinished state, many feel. However, you can get the more definitive version for the PC with additional content. There's also optional download content available, and plenty of open world side quests for the start of the game. However, as you get to the end of the game, it kind of streamlines, pushes you towards the end. Number 15, we have Final Fantasy III, coming in at 30 hours of playtime. It's a little more straightforward than Final Fantasy II. However, we did not get this in America until the Nintendo DS 3D Remake or mobile. At number 14, we have Final Fantasy X-2, 31 hours. Basically a Charlie's Angel kind of themed all-female cast follow-up in the world of Spira. Number 13, Final Fantasy V at 32 and a half hours. This is the game that was beginning development to be released in America. However, with the Super Nintendo, Final Fantasy VI became the follow-up, released as Final Fantasy III. Number 12, Lightning Returns, Final Fantasy XIII at 34 hours. Here we have the conclusion to the Lightning trilogy, better than the previous one and completes the story. Recently released Final Fantasy VII Remake at number 11, 34 hours. This is only the first part of the entire trilogy for this game, but this is released as a game, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and this version is 34 hours. Coming into the top 10, we have Final Fantasy VI, 35 hours. I recently watched a speed run that actually took 6 hours, but normal players will spend approximately 35 hours playing this. It was a very great game when it was released as Final Fantasy III. I remember playing that a long time ago. The characters' stories are pretty well written. Number 9, Final Fantasy VII, 38 and a half hours. Introduced the character Cloud as the first game for PlayStation with 3D. First RPG Final Fantasy in 3D for PlayStation. Number 8, Final Fantasy IX, 40 hours. Following up the previous kind of science fiction, modern themed Final Fantasy VII and VIII, the Final Fantasy IX returned to a more old style. Number 7, Final Fantasy Tactics. However, it's not a numbered Final Fantasy title. It was a original Final Fantasy, and we'll be including it here. It's a turn-based strategy type of game. A little different than the other Final Fantasies, but then so are the newer Final Fantasies, as they're more action RPG type. Number 6, Final Fantasy VIII at 42 hours. Prior to this, I had played Final Fantasy II as my first Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy III as the second. Did not have a PlayStation at the time and eventually got a PlayStation 2, but bought the 7 and 8 at the same time as they were a deal for them, and I ended up playing Final Fantasy VIII before 7, and personally I enjoyed 8 a lot. After going back to 7, it was like a downgrade on the graphics and still enjoyable, but for me I enjoyed Final Fantasy VIII even more, and that's at 42 hours. Number 5, Final Fantasy X, 48 hours. Here's the upgraded graphics for PlayStation 2, highly narrated and voice acted installment focusing on the pilgrimage of Yuna traveling through the world to save Spira. Number 4, Final Fantasy XIII, 49 hours. Often received a lot of negative reviews due to its linear-based gameplay. First about 20 hours of the game is fairly linear before it opens up slightly. And top 3. Here we have the winner for the single player Final Fantasies. Number 3, Final Fantasy XII at 60 hours, beating all the previous games by quite a margin. Had a fairly open world to explore and took a time to go to each of the areas. Number 2, Final Fantasy XIV, 231 hours. Going through this main scenario, it's a lot of menus and kind of pointless side quests, which are considered the main quest, and a lot of fetching and running back. However, playing through the scenario for Final Fantasy XIV, it's sitting at the number 2 spot. And of course, this is what I love to see, Final Fantasy XI, number 1, 707 hours. Obviously, there's a lot more to do on these 2 MMORPG versions of Final Fantasy, but playing through the main scenarios, you still have plenty of playtime. Obviously, I have a character with 1,380 days of playtime, but playing through the main scenario will be 707 hours. So here we have the ranking of all Final Fantasy games ranked by their playtime. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. We'll be adding more videos. Enjoy.